Good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank Rabbi Newhouse and Ahavas Torah congregation for hosting this year tonight. My name is David Rosenblatt, and I work as a commercial litigator at the law firm of Stockton and Braverman in downtown Fort Lauderdale. A little over a year ago, my firm partnered with the North Miami Beach Kollel to start the Business Halacha Awareness Initiative. Essentially, our goal was to provide clients and other Jewish businessmen in the community with the practical knowledge regarding operating successful businesses in the secular world while being fully compliant with halacha. This includes providing guidance regarding settling disputes in Beis Din rather than civil court, drafting halachically compliant contracts, and halachic estate planning. As part of this initiative, my firm and other local law firms host monthly lunch and learns, which can be attended over Zoom. The initiative also has shiurim and chaburas across the South Florida Jewish community. On the bima there, we have some brochures and QR codes if anyone's interested. Unfortunately, last week, we suffered a tremendous loss. Rabbi Peretz Lane, Olav Shalom, was a young, brilliant attorney practicing at my law firm. He was a big supporter of this initiative. He always attended the events and the shiurim. He promoted the classes as well. He was a Gemara Rebbe at Hebrew Academy High School and then at Yeshiva High School in Boca. He took law school courses in the evening while teaching during the day. While in law school, he wrote an article that was published in the Nova Law Review entitled "To Keep or Not to Keep," comparing Jewish law, the common law, and Florida's statutory law on fines. After graduating law school, he worked at my firm for around a year before receiving his cancer diagnosis. Not only for my firm and this initiative, but for the entire Klal Yisrael, we suffered a tremendous loss when he passed away this past Erev Shabbos. May the beautiful words of Torah we hear tonight be Le'ilui Nishmas Rav Peretz ben Rav Alter Eliezer Zichrono Livracha. Another aspect of the Business Halacha Awareness Initiative is that we have esteemed Talmidei Chachamim who are expert in Choshen Mishpat travel to South Florida and come to speak to our community. Tonight, we are fortunate to have with us Harav Shraga Feivel Zimmerman, Shlita, the Av Beis Din of the Federation of Synagogues in London. Prior to becoming the Av Beis Din in London, Rav Zimmerman was a Talmud of the Mir Yeshiva and of Rav David Soloveitchik's Brisk in Yerushalayim. Rav Zimmerman has previously served as a Dayan for the Kahal Adas Yeshurun Kehillah in Washington Heights, and later as Rav of Kahal B'nai Ashkenaz of Monsey. In 2008, Rav Zimmerman became the Rav and Av Beis Din of Gateshead, England. He served prestigiously in Gateshead for over a decade before moving to his current role as Av Beis Din in London in January of 2020. Thank you so much, Rav Zimmerman, for coming to speak to our community in Miami Beach.
Shus, the Marad Asra, and all those that have gathered. Chairman repeated my biography, so I have no need to review it again. It's found on Wikipedia if you're interested. At the moment, at this point in life, I serve as the Rav and Av Beis Din of the Federation of Synagogues of London. I'd just like to explain a bit for those that are American. In Europe, shuls are independent and they have their own Rav. However, they affiliate with a larger umbrella organization known as a Kehillah. For example, in London, every shul, or almost every shul, will either be part of the United Synagogue, the Federation of Synagogues, or the Union of Hebrew Congregations, of Orthodox Hebrew congregations. You'll belong to one of those. These shuls will belong to an umbrella organization. My position in the Federation of Synagogues is serving as the Rav and the Av Beis Din of the umbrella organization. There are 40 shuls. These 40 shuls affiliate with this umbrella organization. I'm the Rav of the umbrella organization. How can you be a Rav of umbrella organization if you don't have any congregants in it? I am the Rav of the Rabbanim. I do not deal with people anymore. I did this for over a quarter of a century. And
which one is hotter?
It's a good question. Someone once came, one of my congregants said, Rabbanim aren't Jewish. I said, why do you say so? He says, in Kaddish Rabbanim, you say Al Yisrael, Val Rabbanim. Must be that there's two separate things. It's a different thing. So I deal with Rabbanim, and I had a Bezdin where the people refer their cases to. The Bezdin, like every Bezdin, has various activities. On Mondays and Thursdays, largely we do Choshen Mishpat, Dinei Torah. Wednesdays I do Gittin and marriage authorizations. Tuesday, decisions on Kashrus and Chevra Kedisha. Tonight's share is called Behind the Dayan's Gavel, and to show that we mean what we say, I brought along my gavel from the Bezdin. Tried to use it as little as possible, but sometimes it's necessary to restore order to a circumstance that gets a little bit out of hand. And I would like to, what I'll do tonight is discuss a bit of Bezdin procedure, and at the same time discuss some cases that we're dealing with at the moment to give you some insight. Now, every Din Torah is initiated by one party called the Teveya, the claimant. He calls the respondent to a Din Torah. Generally, respondents don't want to go to Dinei Torah because they're very happy the way they are. It's only the claimant who wants the Din Torah. How does he do it? He goes to a Bezdin and asks them to send a summons known as a hazmana. A respondent receives a hazmana. He has two options. He has an option to say, yes, I'm coming to this Bezdin, or he has an option to say, no, I prefer another Bezdin. Because in halacha, it's halach achara nitva. It's the respondent, the defendant, that gets to choose the venue. If he says, I am not coming to any Bezdin, then again, historically, they put the person in cherem. It happens to be illegal in England to put someone in cherem because it's contempt of civil court. After 3 hazmanos, yeah. No, even after 1 hazmana, he says, I'm not coming, then you put him in Serev right away. So in England, you're now allowed to put someone in excommunication for not coming to a Bezdin because that is contempt of court. But ultimately, what we do is write a letter about him that he's a person who doesn't follow, he's a loitzai estina, he doesn't follow halacha. And if you want to know the halachas of this person, look it up in Yeredeus Sin Machin Lamed Dalet. We're not doing anything. We're not proclaiming anything about him. We're just telling you what is his status in halacha, and you could look it up. And then we also give them a heter to go to civil court. Most people do show up eventually. 1 hazmana, 2 hazmana, but eventually the item comes, and the first thing is sign an arbitration contract. An arbitration contract would make the ruling of the Bezdin enforceable in civil law. If a person says, no, I'll come to Din Torah Avada, but I'm not signing an arbitration contract, so we know that what he wants to do is come to a Din Torah, and if he wins, he's very happy, and if not, he'll just contest it in court, and therefore we will send it off to court right away, or do whatever needs to be done until the person signs it. The arbitration contract, which I have one in front of me, basically empowers the Bezdin as an arbitration panel, and it sets the terms and conditions of which this arbitration will take place. What happens if you have 3 dayanim and one of them takes ill? Who's going to replace that person? On what basis is this going to be judged? What about the payments? I'll tell you an interesting clause. Sometimes A sues B, sues the company, and B comes as a representative of the company. You ask him, are you a representative of the company? Yes, I'm a director. Person signs. At the end of the Din Torah, he says, by the way, I'm not a director. I fooled you, and you're suing no one. So in the arbitration contract, it says that if a party is an organization, corporate body, the undersigned on behalf of that party declares that he is authorized to represent that party. If it transpires not to be so, then he'll have personal liability on himself for the entirety of the case. That usually dissuades people. Now, one of the titles here was how to run a halachic compliant business. Now, they tell a story that someone was a sheikhet, and he felt the responsibility of shechita is too much. One slight false move, and you can feed people tarfus. So he decided he's going to go into business instead. So he went to ask Absal Salanta, what do you think? Absal Salanta said, "Verstehe ich nicht. I don't understand you, Bechlal. All of shechita is 28 semanim in Yeredeya. Business is Chayshim Mishpat is approximately 430 semanim. Why, if you're afraid of the responsibility of 28 semanim in Yeredeya, which is generally easier, why aren't you afraid of the responsibility of 430 semanim? However, at the same time, that places a limitation. Since there is Marav here tonight, we will not be able to go through all of Chayshim Mishpat tonight. But what we will do is discuss various cases. Now, one of the issues are, after you resolve which venue, jurisdiction, sign an arbitration contract, is which set of laws do you judge things in? To Yidden, you have to follow Chayshim Mishpat. And a Yid, a Jew, is not allowed to go to court, even if the judgment would be the same. But nevertheless, you should know, at times, two people can have a contract, and they'll write in that contract that the interpretation of this contract will be subject to the laws of England and Wales, or the state of Florida. Now, they cannot adjudicate it in court, but when they adjudicate it in Bezdin, since they agreed that the interpretation or the arbitration should be based on the laws of England and Wales, so then the Bezdin has to arbitrate it in accordance with the laws of England and Wales. Now you might be asking, but we learned Chayshim Mishpat, and we are Dayan, and we happen not necessarily know laws of England and Wales, or the contract could say the state of California. And the answer is every Bezdin has legal advisors that will advise the Bezdin on what is the civil law in that matter. This brings up a different question. If it doesn't say in the contract which group of laws, so then you follow Chayshim Mishpat. But one of the halachas in Chayshim Mishpat is Dina de Malchus Dina. So what do you do when civil law and Jewish law come in conflict in a financial matter in which there is Dina de Malchus Dina? And the answer is that if you learn Siman Shin Samach Tes and other places, the Ramah takes a rather expansive view of Dina de Malchus Dina, that in any place, with the exception of certain halachas of Yerusha, of inheritance and the like, two people that are operating a business in a country accept upon themselves the laws of that country, and therefore they made a Kabbalah to conduct themselves according to those laws, and therefore the civil law will override the Jewish law on the matter because they agreed to do so. That's how the Ramah interprets Dina de Malchus Dina. The Shach says that Dina de Malchus Dina does not apply when it contradicts Jewish law. However, he acknowledges that although the narrow definition of Dina de Malchus Dina does not override Chayshim Mishpat, but many times the Dina de Malchus forms the Minig HaMedina. This becomes the industry standard or the conduct of business people. And if you learn Bava Basra, you learn Chayshim Mishpat, many times it says, this is the halacha, but hakoil ke Minig HaMedina, because the Minig HaMedina does override Chayshim Mishpat. So the Shach says that civil law per se will not override halacha, but if the civil law becomes the implicit understanding of the parties engaged in this transaction, then the Bezdin will follow it because that's what they agreed to themselves. And therefore, this applies largely in contracts between people. For example, you lend money to a corporation. In civil law, corporation, there's no personal liability. In Jewish law, corporations, according to most opinions, don't exist. So what happens? You lend money to a corporation which has one director and one shareholder, 100% shareholder, and he is the sole director. This corporation loses money, but he's still a very wealthy person. In halacha, you can collect it. In pure chesed mishpat, you could collect it. In civil law, you cannot collect it. You'll ask the Ramah. Civil law will be followed over here. Even if you'll ask the Shach, he'll say, although civil law does not override Jewish law, but nevertheless, anyone who lends money to a corporation knows what a corporation is, and that was his das, his stam das, his implicit understanding of the circumstance that there won't be personal liability. Same is true for, in Igris Moshe it says, same is true for bankruptcy law. Bankruptcy doesn't exist in halacha. You can't just absolve yourself. You can absolve yourself from sins, but not from debts. And therefore it doesn't exist. This tshuva of a helfnish, the tshuva helfnish on chayvis. But nevertheless, it exists in civil law. People dealing in, at least in commercial circumstances, where they recognize this is a possibility, they implicitly agree to it. The same is true in employment contracts. In halacha, employment contract binds you to whatever it says in the contract. In civil law, especially if you live in a socialist country or a semi-socialist country, there are many, many, many rules. You can't fire people unless for constructive reasons. You have to pay them severance pay. There's a minimum wage, which exists in America also. None of these things are written in the contract. However, since this is the implicit understanding of people engaged in an agreement, so albeit, even according to the Shach, that you don't follow Dina de Malchus Dina to override Jewish law, but this Dina de Malchus Dina has become, the Dina de Malchus has become the Minhag Medina, which that does override it. So you might ask, so then what's the difference between the Ramah and the Shach? Whether the Ramah says that this is a dictum of Dina de Malchus Dina, and the Shach says no, there's no dictum of Dina de Malchus Dina, but the Dina de Malchus forms the Minhag Medina. The answer is when there is no agreement between the parties. It's a one-sided activity. Someone stole from someone was mazik someone wants to compete against someone else. And there are civil laws in that matter, but they have not engaged in any contract or any form of agreement. According to the Ramah, you'd have to follow Hashavas Aveda, if there are rules of Hashavas Aveda that are contradict Chesed Mishpat. According to the Ramah, you'd have to follow those rules. According to the Shach, no, because there is no agreement which can be interpreted by an implicit understanding. Now, one of the issues that come up in Dinei Torah is representation. I happen to be doing two cases at the moment where A and B formed a partnership. B consists of three partners. One of them is the director, and the other two are just shareholders. A made various agreements with B, and somewhere along the way, for reasons which are not yet clear, because we're still in the middle of the case, B voluntarily changed the terms of the partnership to favor A. Now, his two partners, co-shareholders, are saying, listen, he wasn't authorized to do so. A says, I dealt with B all along, and how am I to know? Now, this case happens to be a simple case, because since B is a director of the corporation representing the shareholders, as a director he has rights to make every decision on behalf of the shareholders, and his decisions are binding on the shareholders. Now, if the shareholders feel that the director wasn't representing them and he violated his fiduciary responsibility to them, well, that will be subject to a different suit between the shareholders of B, but it will not affect the agreement with A. Slightly different is, here again, a different case where A and B have a agreement. A is a contractor who's building B are their investors, and they are creating a development. B has 4 partners, all of whom are both shareholders and directors. However, the managing partner, the one who was dealing with this development, was a certain person, Mr. H. And all along, Mr. H was dealing with, on behalf of Corporation B, in the dealings with A. Somewhere along the way, the development actually was successful. Usually fights happen when things are not successful. Here it was successful. And A said to Mr. H representing B, so pay us up. B said, I would prefer to, instead of paying you, I want to go on to a bigger development, and I would like to withhold the money, which every debtor wants to withhold money, but here, in return, I will take it as an interest-bearing loan via het iske. So A said, Gesundheit, we'll take the money that we're owed, which was like a bit over £2 million, and we'll convert it into a iske. And the iske is being put in the next development that B is investing. The second investment did not do as well, and it's taking a longer time. And finally, A says, pay up. By this point, the £2 million turned into £2.45 million because it ran up £450,000 in iske. So he calls them to a din Torah. All the other partners in B say, we never knew that he didn't pay you and he reinvested it into our business. That was done against our will, and we did not know about it. More so, in our incorporation papers, it says, albeit any director can represent the entirety of the partnership, that is in our core business. However, to take out loans or to sell the company, we need a decision of 3 out of the 4 directors. So now, it's true Mr. H is a director. It's true that he's a shareholder. But they have an internal agreement that no single director can take out a loan without everyone, 3 out of the majority of the partners, agreeing to it. And here this brings up a different question, which is found in the Piskei Tshuva, and it's also found in civil law, that there's a doctrine of presumed authority. If I'm dealing with someone, and the presumption is that he has authority, and this presumption was created by the company he's representing, albeit he actually doesn't have the authority, the other person is allowed to operate on this presumption of authority, and it will obligate the people who created that premise. There's even a case in Piskei Tshuva where someone fired a manager and he didn't inform his customers about it, and the manager kept on dealing on behalf of his boss without acknowledging that he was ever fired. Now, he clearly had no right to do it because he was fired. But nevertheless, there was a presumed authority, and since whenever there is presumed authority, a person is allowed to operate it, and everyone is bound to it. Again, there'll be a mighty lawsuit between each other. Next, A and B. A owns a property. It could be developed, made many apartments. A doesn't have money to develop it. B has money and says, I'll buy the property from you. A says, I don't want to fully let go of the property. I want to have something out of it also. So I'll sell it to you as follows. I'll take £4.5 million as a down payment. With this, you will build 50. The first 50 apartments belong to you, to the buyer. In the next 20 apartments, between 50 and 70, I will receive an overage payment of £140,000 per apartment. Anything above 70 belongs to you. Like this. Everyone is incentivized here to build as much as possible. Build 100 apartments. The buyers get 50, overage payment of 2.8 million to the sellers, besides the 4.5 million that they paid, and the next 30 apartments will belong to them. That was the plan. In life, not everything goes according to plan. What happened? The buyers realized they can't build more than 70 apartments. They're not going to get planning permission for more than 70 apartments. So what did they do? They built 51 apartments. 50 apartments of a standard size apartment and one massive penthouse, 2-story penthouse. And said, okay, we owe you, as according to the contract, £140,000 for the overage for one extra apartment. Other people say, what do you mean? But you could have built here 20 apartments and you owe us £2.8 million. So, but it says in the contract, for each apartment, it doesn't say the size. It does not say the size of the contract, size of the apartments in the overage contract. And therefore, it just goes by the units, it does not go by the size. Now, some lawyer there messed up, but that's besides the point. Because they should have written the size of the apartments in the contract, because this could have happened. They didn't think of it because they they're dreaming they're going to make 100 apartments and everyone's going to make money over here. Bottom line is, in this point, you might have a divergence between civil law and Jewish law. In civil law, you'll look exactly at the wording of the contract. In halacha, you look at what was the kavanah behind this agreement, and you'll interpret the contract based on the understanding of what happened. And we had the unfortunate merit of having to comb through probably 600 pages of emails that went back and forth, which formed the basis of the agreement, which was then written in one piece of paper. After going through all the emails that went back and forth, it was very apparent that their plan was to build apartments of 80 meters each, which are quite small, and on that basis they can build 100 and everyone's in the money. And if that was their thing, so when they built one apartment of 1,600 square meters, you should know they owe £2.8 million. Next, many times you have disputes. You have a contractor and investors, developers. Contractors feel they're not getting paid properly or being paid in time. They walk off the job. Now, if they walked off the job unlawfully, they'd be responsible for all damages, because normally it costs a lot more to finish a job than to do the whole job from the beginning per square meter. If they walked off lawfully, so they have a right to get paid in accordance to what they did. This is what we call Yad Balashta ala al Yaina ala Tachtena, which is, or the Yad HaPoel is ala al Yaina ala Tachtena. Depends who was in the right or wrong. That's something a Bezdin will decide. But then you have a different dispute. Let's say they walked off lawfully. What percentage of the building did they build and they're entitled to payment? You can't go there, look now, because it's fully built. The question is, what percentage was done by the first contractor? What percentage was done by the second contractor? Now, this is certainly out of the purview of a Bezdin, but we are enjoined here to judge it. The only way to do is to bring in a quantity surveyor, a QC, that will, a QS, that will decide this. Now, who chooses the QS, which they can fight about endlessly, and who's going to pay for it? So you should know that in an arbitration contract, Clause number 5, it says the parties hereby authorize the Bezdin to appoint experts and professionals to submit opinions which the Bezdin feels are required for the case, and the parties hereby commit to pay any fees in that regard, and therefore that empowers the Bezdin to do it. Otherwise, this itself will turn into a din Torah. It's commenting before, every din Torah has or every court case has an underlying emotional dispute. And that's why the worst disputes are family ones. Like they say, there's no feud like a family feud. Why is that so? Not because of the choshen mishpat of the case, but the underlying emotions that fuel this case. And although, like I say, I do have a gavel, and when things get out of hand, I do use it, but you should know, sometimes that's when they're just hurling insults at each other. But when they start letting loose all the invective at each other, that's when the truth comes out. Sometimes people are very well coached and very well and control themselves until they lose it. And when they lose it, all of a sudden that's what comes out. And it's unfortunate to say that in family disputes, what comes out is a sibling rivalry that pre-existed. I was doing a case, and Mamash didn't understand what's going on. It's a brother and sister fighting over their mother's Yerusha. Both of them are independently wealthy people. The whole Yerusha is minuscule compared to their own personal wealth. So what are they fighting about? And it's in the brother's name, and the sister wants half of it. And what are you fighting about? And all of a sudden, Taka, when things got out of hand, you see the sister screaming to the brother, you know, Mommy, 40 years ago she had a heart attack, and you were too busy with the business to go visit her, and I was expecting a baby, and I had to go take care of her. This is the din Torah. It's not about the money. Or I had one brother scream to another, Daddy always loved you more than he loved me. Now, once you recognize that, there is sometimes a Pesach to just work out the underlying emotions. In my Bezdin, we have 4 Dayanim. Now, how could you have a Bezdin of 4 Dayanim? Because ein Bezdin shakel. On every case, we appoint 3 as an arbitrator and 1 as a mediator. And the arbitrator and the mediator are not allowed to communicate with each other. And therefore, sometimes along the way, when we're in the middle of arbitrating a case and we see there's an opportunity here to mediate it, then we hand it over to the mediator. The mediator will sit with these people. He is not allowed to communicate with the arbitrators what's said in mediation, because sometimes people will offer more information in mediation than they will in arbitration, and therefore we send it to the mediator, and many times he works things out. If not, it goes back to the arbitration panel. Pay employees are pretty simple. What do you pay an employee? Whatever the agreed upon payment is. What happens if you hire an employee but you don't agree on the payment amount? When it's done, when it's completed, the employer always values the work at less than the employee does. What's the halacha? That's a clear halacha in Choshen Mishpat and Schiras Poilim, that if you have a Schiras Poilim without a ktsitza, it goes at the lowest market rate value. What happens if I don't hire a person b'chlal? He comes and does work for me, and unasked for, but I benefited from it. So this is a concept in halacha called nene. If someone has a sada asuya lita, someone has a field which needs to be planted, and he's looking for someone to plant it, and I come along and plant it, so then I'm entitled to get paid, albeit I was not hired. Now, all dinei Torah about nene will either be about was the person looking to hire someone or not? Because if it's not a sada suyalita, he's not going to get much. 2, was there a hana? If I hire a work, I have to pay him even though I didn't benefit from it. But if the person has a tvi al tznena, you can only be tevei al tznena if the person was a mahana. One slight twist. We had a din Torah as follows. A owns a hotel. B is a caterer. B wants an exclusive contract to be the caterer of this hotel. So A says, I'll give you an exclusive if you help me set up the kitchen and the catering facilities of this hotel. Okay, a deal is a deal. Everyone agrees on that. B went far beyond setting up the kitchen and the catering facilities. He set up the entirety of the hotel. He chose the logo, he chose the branding, he chose the interior design. A few years later, when they got into a dispute about a totally different matter, of course, the caterer says, pay me for I was mahana you, I helped you set up the hotel, and this has a value. A says, but you did it for yourself. You didn't do it to help me. You didn't just appear out of the blue to help me set up a hotel. You did it because you recognize that the success of the hotel will be the success of your catering business. So what happens if a person was unasked to do a job? He clearly did the job. There was hana out of the job. There was financial benefit out of the job. But the person did it for himself. He didn't do it to be mahana the other person. He did it to be mahana himself. Do you have a payment on that? And you have to look up the Nesivos HaMishpat. One big case, which is not a case, but is going on in London at this moment, it's all Miami's fault. But the city of Miami, not the neighborhood. There's a bank called Metro Bank in London. Many Eden have their mortgages and their savings accounts there. And a Colombian Jew who lives in Surfside just bought it. And he bought it outright at 53% of the corporation. Till now, Jews were a minority shareholder. Now they became a majority shareholder. Now you have a very, very big problem. Savings accounts, when you put money in the bank, first I want to just clarify something. People say, I have money in the bank. You have no money in the bank. You lend money to bank. You don't have any money in the bank. That's idea number one. So when you lend money to the bank, you're lending them money on interest. Now, whenever a Jew owns it, you're not allowed to take interest from that person. So people ask, what do? I have a savings account in this bank. Now, this is of the minor things in life, because put your money in another bank. All banks are willing to accept your money. Furthermore, since a bank doesn't have personal liability, according to the Igros Moshe, there's no ribbis when there isn't any personal liability. The bigger shaila is, and this is a terrible problem, is people have mortgages that they took out from this bank. The halacha is, if I'm allowed to borrow ribbis from a guy, what happens if the guy sells a loan to the Yid? So all interest that accrued before the sale, I'm allowed to pay even to the Yid. Any new interest, I'm not allowed to pay. So I have here a terrible problem now. Because people have mortgages, and as of January 2nd, the bank will be owned by a majority shareholding will be a Jew. To date, he has refused to create a heta iska, or even to sell his loan books to a non-Jew. What are people supposed to do with the mortgage that they owe? Now, you could say, so borrow from another bank and pay off your mortgage. Unfortunately, mortgages have prepayment penalties. Furthermore, interest rates have gone up since people have gotten mortgages. Not only that, it's much harder to get a mortgage today because of the market conditions, and not everyone can get a mortgage. So what is a person supposed to do if he has a mortgage, the bank was bought by a Yid, he doesn't want to sign a heta iska, he doesn't want to sell the loan books, these are all his prerogatives, and I'm stuck with a mortgage which I can't get any money to pay it. Been working on this a few hours today. I don't have a solution. If anyone here has a psagat eitzah, we'd be very, very glad to hear an eitzah on this. I'll tell you one case I had. Someone from a Yid, Yid, is in business. He was in New York, and he borrowed money from a bank which is owned by non-religious Jews. He told them, listen, I can't borrow money without a heta iska. Could you send me a heta iska? I said, no problem. Send him a heta iska. He signs it. He sends it in. All of a sudden, a year or two later, he says, you know something? If I recall, I signed the Het Iske, they didn't sign it. They sent me a Het Iske, I put my signature on the bottom, but they never signed it, so they're not bound to it. So he calls up the bank and says, you know, the Het Iske, did you ever sign it? They said, you think we're crazy? We're going to sign a Het Iske? You wanted to feel good, so we sent you a Het Iske and had you sign it. Now you should know, if the party that gives the money doesn't sign the Het Iske, it's totally invalid. What is this man supposed to do? I said, can you borrow money and pay it off? He says it's a $50 million loan, which has a 10% prepayment penalty. To have to take $5 million out of my pocket just wipes me out. So I said, could I see the loan documents? He says, don't worry, I already read through it 100 times, because if the loan document would reference the Het Iske, and the bank signed that, they'd be bound to the Het Iske. He said, don't worry, you think I didn't read it? I read it numerous times. I said, I still want to see it. Could you bring it in to me? So he says, well, it's a big schlep. Could I email it to you? He says, no, you have to bring it into to me. What do you want? I said, I know what I want, but I don't want to tell you. He brings it in, and I see you have a loan document, and you have the Het Iske, which is only signed by him, and that's stapled to the back page of the loan document. I asked him, who stapled it, you or the bank? He said, the bank did. I said, you should know this staple is worth $5 million. Because in New York State law, anything which is annexed to a loan document is considered part of the loan document, and the signature on the loan document obligates the person to the annexed statement. In law, a staple is considered an annexation. It doesn't have to be a written annexation. So you should know, if you would have stapled it, you'd be out of $5 million. You'd be out of $5 million. This staple just saved you $5 million. This is a basic outline of cases that we currently have. And now I'm going to give you a bit of advice. How do you stay out of it in Torah? Sometimes in life, disputes are inevitable. Someone steals from you, someone mazik you. Most disputes are between people who had a prior relationship, mainly partners, landlord, tenants. There are people who have certain financial relationships. Now, you might be thinking, so Rabbi Zimmerman is going to say, don't have any shutfim. It's not a very, very good idea. Certainly don't have shutfim that are Jews. In Yiddish they say, mit ayid esten kegel, or mit mishpacha esten kegel. You eat kugel with your family and do business with other people. But the reality, it's not realistic, because many times you need to pool money to create a business. More so, you have people who, let's say you have a person who's very creative, they can create something, they have no marketing skills at all. You have people with marketing skills that are not creative. The two together can make a successful company. So I've found, from my analysis, that there are three things that cause disputes. One, if you don't get everything in writing. Many people enter partnerships and we trust each other, we're good friends, and we'll work it out. And later, many times it doesn't happen. And people forget the terms of the partnership, people forget what were the conditions, people think. If you have everything in writing, you can't have a suffix later. I said you have I always tell people you have two options. You can treat each other as friends now and scream Ganav at him later, or you can treat each other like Ganavim now and scream friend later. You have two options, take whichever one you want. Next, even if you have all the terms and everything and how this partnership is going to work be written out, what people forget to do is write, how are we going to dissolve this partnership? How are we going to get out of this employment contract? Because people, when they go into something, they think it's going to last forever. In this world, nothing lasts forever. Hopefully marriages should last. But other than that, and I still do a get every Wednesday. And the only reason I do one every Wednesday is because there's only one sofer in London who knows how to write a get. And on Monday and Thursday he works for the London Bezdin, and on Tuesday he works for Kadassia, and Wednesday he works for me. Otherwise we could write gittin every day of the week. And therefore, but marriages are supposed to last forever. Partnerships don't have to last forever. The whole halacha is in Chesed Mishpat, how you break up a partnership, a Pirik HaShutvus. Many people, they write down everything except how we're going to get out of this. And then once one of them wants to get out of it, that's where the disputes happen. And now I want to give you a third piece of advice. I was doing a din Torah, you have two partners. They started a business partnership, they became good friends, family friends. They made simchas for each other, sheva brachas for each other. And 8 years later, they wind up in the din Torah, and they are cursing each other out. This one's screaming Ganev, and this one's screaming Shakran, and whatever. And I pick up my gavel, and I say, I want you to know, before I was a Dayan, or functioned as a Dayan, although I was a Dayan on all my positions, but functioned mainly as an Av Bezin, I used to be a Rav. And there's a difference between the positions. A Dayan remains impassive. If you see the people I work with, they remain totally impassive, totally detached. They'll just hear what people say, not get involved in any way, and just judge it at the end and just walk home. When you're a Rav, you're supposed to try to make peace between people. You're trying to make things work. Now, when I'm functioning as a Dayan, I have to be a Dayan. But sometimes the Rav in me pops out. I can't control myself. So what I want to do is stop the din Torah now for 10 minutes. And Dayan Zimmerman will step back, and Rav Zimmerman's going to take over. And I would like to give you what I see over here. You're screaming Ganev, and you're screaming Shakran. But for 8 years you worked together very well. So let me explain to you what's happening here. Partner A is an older person who entered a partnership for capital appreciation. Partner B is a young person with a family who entered the partnership for income. You have two different objectives in this business. You have everything written out, all the Tanaim, they have contracts, 51-page contracts, but you have totally different objectives in the business. A business that has two partners that have totally different objectives cannot work. So I said, Abu Chaba Kasha. So how did it last for 8 years? I said, you know why it lasted for 8 years? Weil du bist nicht Ganev and du bist nicht Shakran. Because were you a Ganev and a Shakran, you should know you would have fought within the first year. You happen to be very honest people, scrupulously honest, but you have totally different objectives. And because you have totally different objectives, this thing cannot work. And then I said, the Rav in me is retiring, and the Dayan's taking over. And I said, and now we are going to break up this shutvus amicably, because that is what it is. And this is my third piece of advice, which I can't think. You can enter a partnership and you can write everything down, but you didn't have a mission statement in the first place why we're creating this business. What is the objective of the business? Invariably, if people have different objectives, invariably you'll come to a dispute. And therefore, before you enter a partnership, don't not only get the what, but get the why. Why are we doing this? Of course, why I'm doing it to make money. But there's different ways of making money. Like I say, there's capital appreciation. You know, someone's capital appreciation will take the profits and reinvest it in the business. A person who needs income is going to take out all the money. They're both viable and valid business models. It just so happens to be that two people cannot work on the different operating objectives. And therefore, I implore everyone, I don't mind seeing you. You can come visit in London anytime, but I prefer not to be sitting behind the desk and judging anyone. Agav, I get paid a yearly salary. It makes no difference to me if people come to me for din Torah or not. Furthermore, I have absolutely no ulterior motive to extend. Most dinei Torah are addressed in one session or possibly two, simply because we don't get paid by the hour, we don't get paid by the case. I get a yearly salary, and the less I work, the better off I am. And therefore, sometimes out of necessity, something will drag on because it's very, very complex. But most things are not so complex and can be easily sorted out in 3 hours. Never sit for more than 3 hours because it just fries the mind. But I would, like I say, don't mind coming to Miami, give shiurim or whatever, but I don't want to see you in Besdin, and therefore I just implore you, get everything in writing, figure out what is your exit strategy, and before you enter any arrangement, figure out why you're doing it, not just what you're doing it, and then you should know, Zayin ha'emes v'ashalom avu. Have a good night.
What is the purpose when you go with a shit to make a sound?
Yeah.